Welcome back, podcast fans. I'm your host, Annette Hines, and this is Parenting Impossible, the Special Needs Survival Podcast. And I'm here today with Jim Lange, who is going to talk to us about financial planning, tax issues, things that you might not think of as fun stuff to talk about, but believe me, such essential information. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Annette.
So I'm excited to have Jim here because I am a little bit of a planning, fanatic, as anybody who's listened to this show more than a couple of times would know. And Jim has a nice specialty in that he really talks about planning for parents of kids and adults with disabilities. And it's not easy to find somebody with that financial expertise. And a lot of times people will ask me, do I really need somebody, either a tax advisor or a financial planner who has a specialty or an expertise in families like mine? And my answer is always yes, if you can find them. Yes, yes, yes. So, Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your family, and how you got interested in this area?
Well, sure. And again, thanks for having me, Annette. My wife and I have a daughter with a disability. And after it was confirmed that she would likely never be able to work, our issue became, oh my goodness, we not only have to provide for ourselves and our daughter while we're alive, but she might survive us by 40 years. How are we going to accumulate enough money and be smart about it so that we'll have enough money for ourselves and we'll have enough money for our daughter after we're gone? And that was by far our biggest worry. That was our, keep you up in the middle of the night. And fortunately, I do have a background as a CPA and an estate attorney with a particular expertise in inherited IRAs and inherited Roth IRAs. So I was able to come up with, let's say, the solution that solved our problem. And as a result of the three actions that I think that we will get into, our daughter will be better off by $1.9 million in today's dollars compared to if we had done nothing. And then after, of course, every single client is different. Every person has their own situation. But I think the three common denominators that I came up with for our family is applicable to many, many families, particularly IRA and retirement plan owners.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to share my solution with the world. So I
Well, I
wrote a report, a book, and now I'm off talking about and spreading, let's say, my
mhm.
solution that could help parents of a child with a disability.
I love that. And what you mentioned is the number one question that people come to an estate planner, a financial planner with. How much money do I need? What do I have to save? It varies in the way they phrase the question, but it's always about, how is my kid going to be okay when I can't provide for them anymore? When I'm physically not here, when, you know, how am I going to do this in my retirement? So again, the question, it changes shape a little bit, but it's that basic question, right? As you said, keeps us up at night. So when we were talking before we got on the podcast, you mentioned there are three critical things that a parent or parents must do. Why don't we start off with that and talk our way through what those three critical planning things are?
Okay, so the first thing that might be a little basic for some of your listeners, but I am shocked at how often this critical issue is not taken care of, which is qualifying for the child for government benefits known as SSI or SSDI. And this is mission critical because, Debbie McFadden, one of the co-authors of our book, calls
Mhm.
it the golden ticket. And it qualifies the child for a certain monthly income. It might depend, but let's even just say in the ballpark of $900 a month, a little bit more for SSDI.
Mhm.
It qualifies the child for healthcare benefits, Medicare, often tuition benefits, equipment benefits, vocational rehab benefits,
Mhm.
and estate planning benefits that we will talk about after the parent dies. And it's really mission critical. And if you don't have that right, the next two steps are really almost problematic. So the first thing that the parents really have to do is to get their child qualified for government benefits. And
Mm.
usually, particularly for parents of a younger child, that will be SSI compared to maybe an older parent or a child who has worked and has their own work record. But SSI is a government benefit, and it's really a poverty program. And what that means is the child has to be broke. And if the child is younger than 18, the government is going to add the parent's income and assets. So typically, for most of your listeners, you're not going to be able to qualify that child for SSI or SSDI until they are 18 years old. So that becomes the first mission critical step. Now, are there things that parents should do before 18? Absolutely. But
Mhm.
let's just say the first step is after your child turns 18, and even if the child's 40 and you haven't done it yet, the most important thing I would say, more important than the planning I do, um, and even sometimes estate planners do, is to get the child qualified for SSI or SSDI.
And do you have families who tell you, I don't really want to do this?
Well, I probably do, but frankly, I'm not interested in working with those people.
Yeah.
The, the common objection, which is, let's say, the most reasonable objection, is, well, that's going to um, almost put a red mark or
Mhm.
an X on my child, and that my child will be considered disabled, and how will my child be able to face the rest of the world, etc. And I'm not saying that that's not a legitimate concern. As parents, we always want to talk about what our child can do.
Can do, right?
With SSI, and when you're applying, you actually don't want to take that position. You want to talk about what your child can't do. And
Right.
my premise is it is so difficult to provide for a child with a disability for both our lifetimes and the child's lifetime. We can't afford not to take advantage of this government program and everything that comes along with it. So
Mhm.
I would just tell parents, if that this is really mission critical. I think something like 93% of the applications are denied at the first time, and the appeals process is difficult. So you have to take this step very, very carefully and very importantly.
Mhm.
Um, but if you are interested in providing for your child after your child turns 18, this is going to be the first step. And, if your child has a missing finger or has some type of disability that they could still work, you're probably not going to get qualified. But if your child does have a major disability, is likely not to be able to go to work, is not likely to be able to do some normal
Mhm.
things in life, then this is mission critical.
Okay. I couldn't agree more, by the way. All right. What's the next step?
So the next step is to get your estate planning documents in line, and this will include, obviously, as you know, and you've probably touted many times to your clients, appropriate wills, appropriate trusts, appropriate powers of attorney,
Mhm.
and some of the things that attorneys that work for families that don't have a child with a disability don't think about so much. Things like guardianship provisions and special issues and powers of attorney. Um,
Right.
and you really want a specialist to do this. In fact, I'm an estate attorney, and you would think, oh, well, gee, Jim, if you're an estate attorney, you probably do a lot of these types of wills, and you've done those for many years, right? And I would say, no, I've done exactly zero. And why is that? Because even though I've done, my law firm has done over 3,000 wills, trusts, estate plans, etc. It's a specialty area.
Hmm.
And as you well know, you have to draft a special trust, and particularly for IRA and retirement plan owners, that special trust must meet four very specific conditions in order to qualify to get the benefits of the
Hmm.
trust that you would want. And in addition, the trust has to be drafted in such a way that it can provide money to the child, but if it doesn't pass the, let's say, the government muster, the government can come in and say, hey, that money is really just the alter ego of the child's money, and we're
Right.
going to deny the benefits, or even worse yet, we're going to retroactively take back benefits that we've already provided for the child. So this isn't something that, that you want to do one or two of a year. To me, you either do a lot of them, or you do what I do, which is, well, what state do you live in? I'll refer you to somebody, because that's not something that a regular estate attorney could do. And
Right.
uh, you, to me, I would want somebody who's done a lot of them, and preferably has done it long enough that they've had deaths when these trusts kick in, and
Hmm.
they can help you do things after, I'm sorry, they could help your executor or trustee after you're gone. So
Yeah.
it's a specialty area, and you shouldn't mess with this. And I know that, we have some do-it-yourselfers. This is not something you don't want to pack your own parachute. If you want to do your own investments and be a low-cost guy and invest with Vanguard, I get it. You know, um, but and maybe try, if you're going to try to save some money and qualify the child yourself for SSI or SSDI.
Hmm.
Although frankly, I'd probably prefer that you go to an expert that, has experience in getting these kids qualified. But you don't want to mess around with being a do-it-yourselfer for these types of wills and trusts, for a lot of reasons. But A, you can botch it, and B, you want somebody that you've worked with and trusted, and either they or their firm is going to survive you and will
Hmm.
help your trustee or executor do everything that needs to be done after you're
Yeah.
gone.
Well, Jim, that's what you're saying is that this is a long-term relationship. It's not really a one and done. When you have someone who's advising you about all of the challenges, issues, difficulties, and opportunities for planning a life for someone with a disability, you're not going to pop in, get your estate plan done, get your wills and trusts done, and then you never see this person again. So it's really good to have a relationship and a trusting relationship with the folks that are supporting you. We call that our circle of care here, so I'm so glad that you agree with me that you need somebody who is specialized, and can really answer all your questions and not just write up a fancy piece of paper for you.
And I would say go one step before that, and you're like a shining example of this, which is to provide your clients with additional resources other than
Mhm.
just drafting documents. I mean, here you are, getting up at, for me, it's 6 a.m., talking about, what parents can do to provide for their child, and providing even something that you might not be involved with, which we're going to get into, which is some of the planning that I do, um,
Mhm.
which is mission critical for parents. So you're providing a resource for them, and I just think that's marvelous. And to me, um, if you can find somebody who is doing that, not only competently preparing all the documents, which, by the way, unfortunately, I think most attorneys don't do this right. And unfortunately,
Scary, but true. Yeah.
even some people who call themselves specialists, when I examine their documents, they're not so special.
Yeah. Both Jim and I have kids with disabilities, and that alone does not qualify you as an expert. You may have experience on a similar journey as a family, but it doesn't mean that you have the professional expertise. I know that many clients that I've seen, many people that I've talked to really feel like, oh, well, he's got a kid with special needs. He's got a kid with autism. He must know how to do this stuff. And as Jim mentioned early on, he doesn't do the estate planning piece. He has a different specialty. So it's really important to know what you're getting. And one of the reasons that I have had that I invited Jim to come on our show today is because he's all about good resources for families. And we're going to talk about some free resources that he has for you. And I'm so excited about that. And we definitely really want to make sure that we have an educated community out there who can make good decisions and good choices for their family.
I think that that is absolutely mission critical, and spending even just a certain amount of time and sometimes money to get this right. The other benefit that this planning does that is hard to measure is the anxiety relief that comes from having this planning done right. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my wife and I were always worried, oh my goodness. And, without, let's say, some special thinking, the solution of, okay, work longer, spend more, spend less, save more, buy a bunch of life insurance,
Yeah.
get your, and I'm not, of course you do all that, but we were just very anxious, what's going to happen to our daughter? And then when the planning was done, it was like this huge relief, this whole veil of angst was over. And the other thing that I kind of didn't realize is our daughter's a very, very bright young lady, and I didn't quite understand how much anxiety she had about her own financial future. You know, we
Okay.
didn't we didn't talk about it much, and I decided that it might be interesting to interview her, and I actually did this on tape, and I found out, wow, she's been worried herself. And then when she found out, because we didn't really talk about it much, when she
Mm-hmm.
found out all this stuff that I was doing for her, she became very much happier
Yeah.
because she was thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do when mom and dad are gone? They're taking care of me now, but what about later? And then when I kind of explained to her what I was doing, um, I then got her permission, in effect, to tell our family story. And now she's also involved in helping, let's say, um, educating parents with a child with a disability in what they can do. And
Oh.
I'm very proud of her because she is, being proactive in trying to help the community. And before I was afraid, oh no, I can't tell anybody about her. And, what are they going to think
Mm-hmm.
about her? And what are her friends going to think? Because if you met her for 20 minutes, you might not even know she has a disability. And I didn't think I could talk about her without her permission. And I don't mean just when she's 21, she's 29 now. Um, and that is so important too. So you're not only relieving anxiety for yourself and your spouse, but then also your child also.
Mm-hmm. That is such an important point. And it's also, the key to person-centered planning to actually ask your person that you're planning for, what are their ideas? What are they worried about? What do they want to make sure gets done? I love that you did that. That's awesome. All right. So, a lot of our audience probably have heard, one and two, but the third piece of advice that you have, the third critical thing that parents must do, this is really where I want to dig in a little bit more with you. So, what's your third
Well,
item?
well, the third item, I mean, there's obviously a number of planning, just smart general planning techniques and the ABLE Act, which parents often don't know about. But the ABLE Act, as good as it is, it's not a game changer. It's not going to be the difference between your kid being okay and your kid not being okay. But what is, and it's somewhat familiar to a lot of people, but maybe not in the context
Hmm.
of planning for a child with a disability, is to do a series of Roth IRA conversions during your lifetime so that after you die, rather than leaving your child an IRA that's going to be taxable, you're going to leave a Roth IRA that is going to provide tax-free distributions for the life of your child. And when you run numbers, and we're number crunchers, we
Mhm.
in effect, it's most of our planning is okay, well, what if we do no Roth conversion? What if we do 1 year of a big one? What if we do multiple years of small ones? What if we do this
Yeah.
much this year, et cetera, et cetera? So this becomes a matter of math, and it's kind of a math problem of how much and when to convert. But the difference between the optimal result and not being proactive and not doing Roths at all is often hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's dollars. And I think a lot of folks who have a child with a disability, they say, "Oh, my child's going to never going to be able to make a lot of money. They're going to be in a low tax bracket. I'm going to be in a high tax bracket. It sure doesn't
Mhm.
make sense for me to do a Roth IRA conversion, pay tax at a high bracket, and then have my child save taxes at a low bracket." But when you run the numbers, in many cases, I would say many more than not, it does make financial sense, even for people that might not otherwise think it is great for them personally. Although, interestingly enough, depending on their life expectancy, the Roth conversions are very often, in fact, much more often than not, better for the parents, even for getting the child.
Okay. So tell us how this all fits in with the Secure Act and being able to stretch your IRA out for the life of the child if you leave it in trust, et cetera.
Sure. Well, before I even got interested at all in planning for a child with a disability, um, I was an estate attorney with specializing in people who had IRAs and retirement plans. So
Mhm.
my typical client had much more money, and still does, has much more money in a retirement plan than they have outside a retirement plan. So it
Mhm.
would be like a business owner who has a $10 million business, or even a $2 million business and a $200,000 IRA. It's people that might have a million or 2 million in an IRA, and sometimes not even much else. So one of the things that I was very big on before the Secure Act, which was effective on January 1, 2020, is to enable the beneficiary of the inherited IRA or the inherited Roth IRA, and the term that was used was called stretch or
Mhm.
defer the distributions of the inherited IRA over the life expectancy of the child. So let's say, for discussion's sake, that you had $1 million at your death in your IRA, and you left it to a child who might have, say, a 30-year life expectancy.
Mhm.
We have to remember that IRA, and by the way, when I say IRA, I'm going to include 401k, 403b,
Mhm.
457, SEP, KEO, et cetera. This is money that nobody has yet paid tax on. And unless you're going to leave it to a charity, somebody someday is going to pay taxes on it.
Right.
Well, my big thing was, well, pay taxes later. So instead of the child having to take out a lot of money and presumably pay taxes earlier and
Mhm.
potentially at a higher tax bracket, I was a big advocate of what was called the stretch IRA.
Right.
And basically, to use simple math, the if the child didn't need the entire IRA, or maybe they had some other resources, they would have, under the old rules, and the rules are now consistent with one of the exceptions to the new rule, but the old rules would say the child could take just a very small amount, and mathematically it would be 1 over 30, or let's just round off and call it 3% of the balance of the inherited IRA as of December 31 of the prior year.
And
So,
Jim, just to stop you there, you got 30 because the child is expected to live 30 more years around
yes.
there, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you. And that's in the and by the way, that's not an individual life expectancy, where we do of a physical for the child, et cetera, et cetera. That's
Mhm.
actually government determined based on the
Maybe.
age of the child at your death. And I just picked 30, but it could be, if you die young, or if you have a beneficiary who isn't a child, maybe a grandchild, you might have a 60-year life expectancy
Right.
after the IRA owner dies, in which case
Yeah.
the denominator would be 1 over 60 times the balance. So, and
And
then,
the government doesn't care that your child might have individually a shorter life expectancy. This is what Jim is talking about. I just want to make sure we slow down a minute, so everybody can catch up to us. So if you have a child that, under the tables might have 30 more years, but realistically has you know, some factors that implement their life expectant that affect their life expectancy, that's not going to factor in just doing the calculations for how much they must take out the required minimum distribution, take out of the IRA every year. So that's what we're talking about. Slowing down how fast we have to take that money out of that IRA, because we're going to have to pay tax on it. And the shorter period of time you have, the more tax you pay, the higher tax bracket you get into. So, okay, take it away from there.
yeah, and the difference is astounding between, let's, like, even dying with $1 million, um, and qualifying that child. And by the way, the child must be qualified for SSI or SSDI in order to get this inherited stretch IRA. And if you leave $1 million, the difference of what the child will receive over time is literally an additional $1 million by paying taxes later. So this isn't a little deal.
It's
This is
huge.
it's the difference between your child being broke and your child being financially secure. So you want to get that right. In fact, that's even more important than the Roth. But if your child can have tax-free distributions, and
Mhm.
a lot of times, remember that particularly for SSI, the child isn't allowed to have very many resources. So we can't have a lot of money in the child's name. So the money has to go into a trust, and trusts have the highest tax rate of any entity. It's more than married filing separately.
Mm.
So if this money is being devastated by a high tax rate, the child's going to run out of money much faster and is going to have a lot less money available to them for spending.
So
So,
true.
so the if we can convert at least a portion of, and maybe a significant portion of the traditional IRA, 401k, 403b, et cetera, it's not only going to reduce minimum required distributions for ourself and our spouse, which by itself can be enormously valuable, save taxes for us later on in our lives, particularly
Mm.
for people who have big IRAs and would otherwise be subject to very high minimum required distributions. But then after we die, our child can get these tax-free distributions over their entire lifetime,
Mm.
where if you don't qualify for SSI or SSDI, the Secure Act, which I actually think is an enemy of the IRA and
Mhm.
retirement plan owner, says no, you have to take that money out. And in the case of a traditional inherited IRA, pay income taxes on that full amount within 10 years,
Mhm.
thus devastating the ability to stretch or defer that inherited IRA, or better yet, Roth IRA.
And, people who are listening might be surprised to know that we are not always planning for people who are the most profoundly disabled. We often are planning for adult children or other family members who are, somewhat impaired or somewhat impacted, and while, living their best life, are not able to provide for themselves fully. And so we don't always have the ability to have somebody be qualified for Social Security benefits under one program or another. And we still don't want to drop $1 million IRA in their lap because they're vulnerable. Although they can manage their day-to-day life, they wouldn't be able to manage, a large amount of money like that. There's just a lot going on here. And it's so important that you work with your team of planners, your financial advisor, your tax advisor, your estate planning attorney, who understand and are going to individualize a plan for your goals and your people. Right, Jim?
I think it's critical. And, fortunately, attorneys like you often do have a network of somebody who can help them qualify for SSI or SSDI, or you might do that yourself. I don't know. Um, and in your case, maybe a network of estate attorneys that can practice in
In other
states
states.
where you're not licensed,
Yes.
and advisors who can help help parents. And it's not like, oh, okay, I'm an advisor, I'm going to tell you to buy more IBM and less AT&T. No, it's
Mhm.
not that type of, it's more strategic advice, um, which ties into estate planning, which ties into Roth IRA conversions, which ties into the use of ABLE Act, which ties into how much money can you afford to spend, what is the best way to pass on money, and basically to me, one of the greatest things that you can do for parents with a child of a disability is, in effect, transfer a bunch of money that otherwise would have gone to Uncle Sam into a trust for the benefit for your child.
Right. Right. So Jim and I know that this is a pretty heavy subject, and certainly we don't expect everybody to just, understand immediately and be like, sure, yeah, we need to do Roth conversions, we need to do Secure Act trusts, et cetera. But we're all about the information here, and this is just to open up the discussion, right? And to get people thinking about this. So, Jim, tell us a little bit more about how people can find you. And you're in Pennsylvania, but also talk about your free resources that you want to make sure that anybody listening to this podcast can get.
Sure. Well, a little bit like you in that, I have a certain expertise and want to share it with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And after my daughter gave me permission, at first I was thinking, okay, I'm going to write a book because I've written 10 financial books, nothing new for me. I'm going to take the best of the 10 books that I've written, and I'm going to write a book for parents of a child with a disability. And then I thought, well, but the problem is I don't really have any expertise in qualifying a child for SSI and SSDI. And fortunately, I knew who I believe to be the top person in the country. I'm sure there's others, but this woman I have enormous respect for. She was the commissioner of disability with 400 attorneys under her. How would you like to be managing 400 attorneys in that? Anyway, so
No
this
thanks.
so this is what she does day in, day out, and she's been doing it for many years. And she agreed to be a co-author. And then I got a woman named Julian Steinbacher, who, like you, is an estate attorney who specializes in this area. And she wrote, let's say, the estate planning portion and discusses special needs trusts. And then I talked about, Roth IRAs and Roth planning,
Mhm.
and and I get into a lot of the sophisticated techniques that a lot of people don't even know about.
Yeah.
Um, for example, did you know that you can have a Roth 401k or Roth 403b conversion after you die? Now think about that. You're in a high
Wow.
tax bracket, your child's in a low tax bracket, you have a 401k or a 403b, and if you get the planning right, which isn't easy, you can actually plan for the child to make a conversion after you're gone.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I have that and a bunch of other advanced techniques. And we put it together in this book called Retire
Retire
Secure
secure.
for parents of a child with a disability. And what I wanted to do for your listeners or viewers in that is to provide that. And guess what? I'm not going to try to say, oh, and go to Amazon for 25. No, I want to just give this to them for free. Say, here you go.
Amazing.
So if you are interested, if one of your listeners or viewers is interested, at disabledchildplanning.com/PIP, which is special to you, to your listeners. Again, disabledchildplanning.com, PIP. We'll send you the book, the digital copy of the book. No, no anything, no requirements, nothing like that. Um, and it has an extensive table of contents because unless you have serious sleep problems, nobody's going to sit here and read a 500-page,
I
you
was going to say that.
know.
You want to go right to the section that you have questions or interested in learning more about. It's a really good book. I have not read the whole thing. I did, skim through and then jumped in on a couple of sections that Jim wrote that I was really interested in that we talked about today in the podcast. So I'm so excited that you want to go ahead and give this away. We're going to have that information in the show notes for everybody. So that's disabledchildplanning.com/PIP for Parenting Impossible podcast. Thank you so much, Jim, for doing that. And you just had a summit, but you're doing another one. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we did a summit with just the three co-authors, and we didn't put a lot of time or money into it. But we attracted maybe 250 very interested parents, and we gave a semi-high level um, virtual summit with Debbie McFadden talking about how to qualify a child for SSI and SSDI, Julian Steinbacher talking about estate planning for a child with a disability, and then I talked about Roth and planning. And it was so successful that we decided to do this in a big way. And we were able to get one of the top athletes with a disability in the world. Um, Her name is Tatiana McFadden, and she is familiar, more likely to the child than the parent. She's won, I think, 20 Paralympic medals, multiple world championships, many
Wow.
marathons, and she's going to be, let's say, the keynote speaker. Then we'll have the three co-authors, and we're actually in the process of looking for other very high quality speakers that might not address everybody, but might address specifically. So, for example, somebody that might be an executive director of an organization that helps people with, you mentioned autism or
Mhm.
mental disability or multiple sclerosis or something like that. And our plan is to offer a whole bunch over a 3-day period of free talks, and this is all free. We're not trying to make money on this, um,
Mhm.
and give people that option. And if people just sign up for the book, I will put in some type of link of how they can sign up for, let's say, information. Now we're just developing this and it's going to be June 18, 19, and 20. So we don't have all those speakers lined up and we don't have everything organized. But my goal was to put on the best virtual summit for parents
Yeah.
of a child with a disability and really help out a lot of parents get critical information.
That is so awesome. I love it. I love that we can do all of this virtually now so that everybody can participate. It's great that you all are doing that. So don't forget to go ahead and go to disabledchildplanning.com/PIP for Parenting Impossible podcast and get your free copy of Jim's book. You will love it. Well, love it. Yeah, love it. I know this is a tough subject. Jim, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. We really appreciate your time and energy for this topic.
Well, thank you so much. Um, anyway, it's been a pleasure. And it's really wonderful being interviewed by somebody who knows what they're doing, which often is not the case.
Yeah,
particularly in the technical areas
I
where,
know.
I know I was preaching to the choir about what I was saying, and all about the stretch IRA and the conditions. Um, on the other hand, you're only one practitioner and only licensed to practice in Massachusetts, but you're providing information for everybody. So, on
Yeah.
behalf of all your listeners and viewers, thank you.
And Jim, thanks again for letting us geek out today. I love it.
All right. Well, thank you, then.